This last year will most likely go down as one of the most chaotic years in politics, from the ousting of a democratically elected Prime Minister to a cutthroat Tory leadership conference that saw a leader emerge before resigning 44 days later, only to be replaced by the runner-up. 2022 was anything but ordinary for Westminster. But while the Conservatives saw themselves lose ground in the polls to left-wing Labour, the likes of UKIP and Reform UK saw their membership soar by those unable to find a political home in the mainstream arena. And as we head into the new year, what lies ahead for our political landscape? Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by the Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane, to talk through some of these major stories this year. Good evening, Rebecca. Can I ask you first?
How are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you very much. And I wanted to ask you to begin with, what are the highlights from your perspective of this year in political terms?
Well, I think that the main highlight for me was that the Conservatives really showed themselves up for who they actually were, and what an absolute farce they made of the whole year. Thank goodness that they are, hopefully, fingers crossed, on their way out. I don't see that they've got any chance of rectifying it, and that is the highlight for me.
But you say the Tories are definitely on the way out. I mean, the polls are absolutely clear on that. You know, they got trashed in the local elections earlier in the year, and they've had all this turmoil regarding the leadership. But doesn't that leave the opening rather to Labour, insofar as Labour are pretty much definitely going to be in next time? Keir Starmer's definitely going to be the Prime Minister. You can't be happy about that, surely?
Well, I'm still very hopeful that that won't be the case, because
really?
Come January, I do. I know that it's an absolutely massive long shot, but I think that if anything this year has shown us is that anything can happen. So I do have a plan up my sleeve for January. We've already started the motions of talking to centre-right and splinter parties to try and get some potential traction behind one amalgamated party for people to have a very clear and definitive alternative. So that would be my ideal dream scenario. I don't think it's a complete and utter victory for Labour as yet. We've got a good while to go.
But you're talking about the smaller parties sort of collaborating on this. Didn't Reform rule out a collaboration with yourselves?
Well, it'd be lovely if they did rule out, but they're just ignorant. So they don't actually make any response whatsoever. And what we constantly keep on seeing, and what I constantly get, is that the people actually want us to talk, and all we're saying to Reform is let's talk. They completely and utterly ignore every opportunity to do that, which is absolutely ludicrous, because they're not going to win anything by themselves.
So you must be very frustrated, because the smaller parties, ultimately, while we have the first past the post system, there isn't really any chance of things changing in any significant way. And of course, it's not in the interests of the two major parties to bring in proportional representation.
Exactly. I know, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, do they? Which is very ironic given the time that we've just had. No, you're absolutely right. It doesn't favour us. But like I say, anything can happen. But, I'm only 3 months into the post, so I am going to be heavily optimistic. I have to be. It's my job to be. But I genuinely feel that the public are crying out for an alternative, and that they don't want the Conservatives and they don't want Labour. Not really. They do want something that is stronger than that. And I genuinely believe that if we all come together, we absolutely can give that to the public. But, call me naive if you want, but let's see what we're talking in another year's time.
Well, I would have to agree. Politics is unpredictable and can change very rapidly. But just looking back, I mean, you mentioned that you felt that this year the Tories were exposed for what they were. What specifically do you mean by that? I mean, when are you talking about the way in which they had this continual revolving door of leaders and chancellors, and the fact that they couldn't fixate on a particular policy without undermining it a few weeks later? I mean, is it just the capricious nature of the party that you're talking about, or is it something deeper?
I think it's that and something deeper. Rishi Sunak, for me, has got an agenda, and that doesn't fit with my agenda, or rather the lack of one. He operates for the 1%, whereas we operate for the 99%. But what we've consistently seen with the Conservatives is that they have constantly given us inadequate and inauthentic leaders. It started with Boris Johnson, and now people are all of a sudden going, oh, bring back Boris and he'll save the world.
Well, what do you think about
this?
Were they right to oust him in the way they did, though? I mean, it did seem like a sort of major Julius Caesar moment. Do you think that might have been handled a bit better?
I don't think that they could have handled this a bit better because it was all so public and it was all becoming so apparent of how terrible it actually was. So I think that they had no option. And, for me, I know that people don't particularly like to talk about the whole Partygate scenario because obviously people think that it's quite insignificant. To me, it was quite a big deal because it really showed up how inauthentic they were actually being. We've lost all trust this year in our government, and that's the thing that we have to try and get back next year. So they had to get rid of Boris. They might not have done it in the best and most perfect way, but there was never going to be a good way to get rid of him. And then obviously what happened after that belongs in a ridiculous Hollywood movie.
Well, sure. I mean, a movie about Liz Truss would be fascinating. I mean, but I'm just trying to think, when it comes to Liz Truss, I mean, really, she got the short end of the draw, didn't she? I mean, do you feel sorry for her in any way?
I do a little bit, yes. I think that I know that I can definitely say that even UKIP is nothing in comparison to the Conservative Party, but even I underestimated my position. So I absolutely believe that she completely and utterly underestimated the job. And the public platform that she got put, she didn't do a good job. I don't support her in any way. But the public platform that she got put on, and I genuinely think that she was hung out to dry. So I do feel a little bit sorry for her, but you shouldn't have gone into the arena, not really. You weren't prepared.
But she was pronouncing various conservative ideas, which a lot of people were shocked by because the Conservatives haven't felt very conservative for a while. And of course, her plan for economic growth, or at least this attempt for economic growth, that was laudable, wasn't it?
She said whatever she had to do to try and get people on side. I don't think she believed in anything that she actually said. In fact, I think that she's a bigger... Yeah, I genuinely don't believe it. I said it all the time. I sat on GBNews for weeks talking about it. We talked about the leadership debates. I said I don't believe a word that's coming out of her mouth. She's saying whatever she has to do to get in the position. And then she thinks that she can muddle her way through it. And she didn't. She got shown for what she was. So, but I do have compassion for her because I do think that they well and truly went for her. But I think that she did it as part of her own making.
I mean, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, surely, she spoke to Kwasi Kwarteng. They came up with this plan. This was Trussonomics. I mean, it's surely more likely that she sincerely believed that this would be the way to kickstart the economy, but it spooked the markets in a way that she didn't anticipate. Isn't that more likely than it was just her trying to sort of wheedle her way in?
No, like I say, I think that she was saying what she thought that we wanted to hear. And I think that she thought that was getting people inside. I thought that her version of what has unfolded was slightly better than Rishi's. But I don't think that it was appropriate for the time or the place. But I don't think that she really thought it through. I don't think either of them did. And that's why the situation unfolded as it did.
And in terms of the major issues of this year politically, of course, the war in Ukraine has loomed large. And of course, this has had a major impact on our cost of living crisis. Do you have any sympathy for Rishi at all? I mean, he's become Prime Minister at this time. The war is raging, cost of living crisis escalate, inflation going through the roof. It's not easy for him to bring this back, is it? Could anyone do it?
No. Not under the Conservatives. No, not in the slightest. Do I have any sympathy for him? Not really. Again, a little bit like Boris, everybody's pretending like it'd be great if he comes back. I'm sure it'd probably be better than the two alternatives we've now been left with. But I don't think that he is the Lord and Saviour that everybody professes him to be. He was there during COVID. It was him and Boris making these decisions. The furlough, not being transparent and open with actually how much this was all actually costing our people is one of the reasons why we are here today. So I struggle to have sympathy because if he hadn't have been in position as he was when COVID was unfolding, maybe I'd have had a lot more faith in him. But actually, because him and Boris created this absolute storm together, now I don't have any sympathy for him. And I think that there's nobody left in the Conservative Party. I did quite like Kemi Badenoch. I did have quite a lot of appreciation for her. I think that she would have probably been the best candidate, but because she genuinely seemed to be listening to people, whereas these lot don't. They say whatever they think that we want to hear.
Well, that's very interesting. Thanks very much, Rebecca Jane, for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it.